Oh, praise God. I can see, I can sense the vibrancy, and thank you, Pastor Peter, for the kind introduction. I must say, you amaze me that you've come back from the States with jet lag and you're still standing erect and upright and leading this wonderful congregation. Well, why don't you just appreciate your pastor and give him a loud round of applause for all that he's done this morning. It's just great to be back with all of you, and I just want to also just ask my beautiful wife, we've been married for 37 years, just to stand up. Will you welcome Nancy this morning? How many of you want to see a miracle of God in your life? Can I see your hands? Wave it in the air. How many want to be used by God for a miracle to bless somebody else? Can I see your hands? This morning I want to take you back to where it all began, at the first miracle in Cana of Galilee. And this is where it all began. In Jesus' public ministry, this is where he did the first miracle, the conversion of water into wine. Today I want to talk about receiving your miracle. Somebody say, receiving your miracle. And as you begin to open your heart this morning, I want to just give you some pointers as to how miracles happen in our lives. And you know, we live in the 21st century where there are lots of skepticism and cynicism about the supernatural work of God. People think that because we live in a scientific world, miracles cannot happen. And I just want to say this: miracles are outstanding, extraordinary, supernatural events with a very positive outcome. And you can have the next slide. And they are part and parcel of God's purposes for us. And so this is what miracles are. They are extraordinary events with a positive outcome, which is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and are attributed to God. If you like, they are natural paradoxes with a divine cause. And what is a paradox? Well, a paradox is two contrasting truths. Can I have next slide? Which actually shouldn't exist together, but actually they contradict each other, but they do exist together. The red button says verifies the blue button as being true. The blue button then falsifies the red button. Now, if you have these two buttons, these two statements together, then it is a paradox because they can't exist together. Either one is true and one is false, or both can't be existing and stating the same truth. Either the two cannot exist, or only one can exist, or none exist. But you cannot have these two existing together. That is a paradox. And paradoxes are sometimes very, very common in our natural everyday life. I've been married to Nancy for 37 years, and whenever we have arguments, actually we don't have arguments, we try not to call them arguments, we call them animated discussions, okay? So whenever we have animated discussion, sometimes paradoxes spring up, statements that are actually paradoxical. For example, I know of one couple where they have a big argument and the wife turned and said to the husband, "It's not fair. You love your side of the family more than my side of the family." And the husband said, "No, I don't. I love your mother-in-law more than my mother-in-law." There you realize that there is a paradox. The miracle was obviously if he loves his mother-in-law more than her mother-in-law. Now, you know, in science, we have paradoxes. Time and space is a paradox. We always perceive time as linear, but in fact, time is not linear. It has been shown that it is woven in the fabric of three-dimensional space. So you can actually curve time if you actually have strong gravitational forces, to the point that you can actually potentially reverse time. It is possible theoretically to actually laugh at a joke before it is told. Time is a paradox. There are other paradoxes. Light is a paradox. It exists as both wave as well as a particle. Sometimes as a wave, sometimes as a particle. How can it be both? It is both. How do you explain it? We don't know, but it is a paradox. There are other things that are paradoxes. You know, quantum physics is a paradox. At its lowest level, fundamental particles that make up the universe behave in a bizarre way. You know, you can never tell anything about fundamental particles with any great degree of certainty. If you can tell its position, you can't tell its momentum or its speed. If you can't tell its momentum, you can't tell its position. So when you look at fundamental particles and the way they behave, they can be anywhere at any time or nowhere at any time. It's just bizarre in the way they behave. Matter is a paradox. All the matter you can see around you, which you can measure, touch, feel, whether it is at fundamental particle level, at subatomic level, right down to the galaxies and all the galactic bodies you see in the universe, all these matter make up only 4% of the whole universe. The large majority of the matter that is existing in the universe today, you cannot touch or see or feel, but it is out there. 75% of it is made up of dark energy, 21% is made out of dark matter. And dark energy is the matter that actually causes the universe to expand. And not only to expand, but to accelerate it in expansion. The universe is flying apart faster before now than 1 minute ago. What causes it? We don't know. We call it dark energy. And the whole spiraling of the galactic bodies, they are spinning around at a rate faster than whatever matter that there is existing there. There is an unseen matter making it spin round at a rate that faster than scientists actually know why. And it is called dark matter. So dark energy and dark matter ultimately will control the fate of the universe. They will control what happens to us in the long term. Whether the universe actually lands up in an ultimate rip or an ultimate crunch, it will determine. In other words, in the scientific world, what is dark matter? The unseen controls the seen. In the supernatural world, in the spiritual world, suddenly you realize the same principle holds. The unseen controls the seen. So in science, these paradoxes exist. They're contrasting, contradicting truths that actually we don't have any explanation for, but they exist. And just in case you think that these are just fantastical, imaginary nonsense, the people who discovered these truths actually won Nobel Prizes. Albert Einstein won it for the photoelectric effect of light. Werner Heisenberg won it for the uncertainty principle in the way fundamental particles behave. And recently, in year 2011, 3 scientists, Adam Rees, Saul Perlmutter of the United States, and Brian Smith of Australia, won it for the discovery of dark energy. It's all there, but it is a paradox. So at fundamental level in science, there are paradoxes, bizarre behavior, contradicting truths we don't understand, but they exist. At the galactic level, universe, and the cosmological level, it exists. There are paradoxes. In the Bible, we have paradoxes as well. The Bible is written by both God and man. How can it be? Either it is divinely inspired, or man written, or just a concoction of man, but it's both God and man. It's a paradox. God is both 3 and 1. How can that be? How do you explain it? He is 3 persons, but he is one God. Jesus is both God and man. That's imaginary nonsense that people say. But he is both God, he's divine, and human, fully God, fully man. And when science points us out as just imaginary, fantastical nonsense, we can say actually the fundamentals of science itself has a lot of paradoxes. And paradoxes are what make up miracles. When we have 2 events that actually shouldn't happen, and contradicts the laws of nature, but they actually happen, we are faced with a paradox, a natural paradox with a divine cause. Now, my own understanding of miracles, when I became a Christian, in my student days, when I was studying, I first encountered my first ever miracle when I went out with Operation Mobilization to Italy. And at the end of a month tracting in Italy, we were crossing over the Dolomites, back over the northeastern part of Italy into Austria, and in an old bread van. And I've been tracting for and camping out in northern Italy and sharing the gospel with a lot of European students and sharing the gospel to the Italians. And at the end of 1 month, we were in that old rotten bread van, climbing over the Dolomites into Austria, and the brakes failed. I was sitting in the front, And the driver slammed on the brakes, and there was no traction, and he had to apply an emergency handbrake and brought the brake van, to the side of the road. There we are, 1 o'clock in the morning, trapped on the Dolomites, and they lifted up the car boot, and I had to peek into the car, into the van, the bonnet of the van, and with the torch, and we were looking at the brake cylinder, and it was leaking brake fluid, and that was why the brakes had failed. And I turned and said to the leader, a tall Swedish guy by the name of Jan, I said, Jan, we need a mechanic. But where do you get a mechanic at 1 o'clock in the morning on the top of the mountains? And he said, no, we need to pray. I said, prayer? What good is prayer going to do? We need a mechanic. But being a very obedient team member, we all prayed in the van, all 20 of us, as the winds howled outside in the darkness. And after an hour, the leader said, I think we should just try and see if there's anything happen, because, I just sense God is answering our prayer. And I thought to myself, fat hope. And then the driver jumped into the driver's seat and then stepped on the brake pedal, the same way that he had done an hour before. When an hour before, that brake pedal had no traction, it just hit the floorboards. Now it met resistance. He looked absolutely shocked, and I looked at him absolutely shocked. And then we immediately jumped down and lifted up the front of the car bonnet, and then we had a torch and peered again. And to look at the brake cylinder. The leaking had stopped, and there was a dark fluid in the brake cylinder. Now, I have no explanation for it up to today. I'm telling you what I saw. I have no explanation. The only explanation, the only thing that I can surmise must have happened is God must have created brake fluid. Excuse me, can He create brake fluid? Can He really create brake? It seemed fantastical, but I'm telling you what I saw with my eyes. And then we were triumphant. They slammed the bonnet down, we got back into the van, and we drove down the Dolomites and eventually passed Austria into Belgium, France, and then that's how I got a ferry back to England on time. I have no explanation for it. But it turned me from apathy into awe. I was apathetic about God intervening in my everyday affairs. Now it moved me from apathy into God. You can do that. And you can do that. And you still do that today. I remember many years ago, around that time, meeting a Church of England clergyman who was quite an intellectual. He was a believer, but he never believed in miracles because he didn't believe too much that God could intervene in the natural affairs of man. And he decided to test it out by going into a Catherine Kuhlman rally. And this is what he told me. He went to a Catherine Kuhlman rally, and Catherine Kuhlman in those days, in the late 60s, early 70s, was doing great healing in the Los Angeles Coliseum. So he decided, with all his skeptical and cynical mind, to go and just watch whether there were any truly miracles. He planted himself right at the front and just watching all the proceedings. And suddenly, during that ministry time, Catherine Kuhlman said, there's somebody here in the front, somewhere here towards the front. You're being healed of a very bad limp. You were lame before and you couldn't walk, but God has healed you. Would you come up? And just 2 seats away from this clergyman, a man just got up, walked on stage. And Catherine Kuhlman said, could you demonstrate to us? You've been healed, sir? She said, yes. Can you demonstrate to us how to walk? He walked normally. He said, can you run? And he started running. And everybody broke out in rapturous applause, and there was cheers all around. And this Church of England clergyman, he was absolutely cynical. He looked at it, and he turned to the old man sitting next to him and said, that was obviously a plant, wasn't it? It was a setup, wasn't it? I mean, it was obviously a setup. At the right moment, when Catherine Kuhlman calls for a man to be, that man just came up at the right moment so that, there would be just a good atmosphere of faith and the offerings would go up that night. That's obviously what it was. It was a plant, wasn't it? He turned to the man and said, I'm not convinced about this. He turned to this old man, and he noticed that old man had tears running down his eyes. And he said, you don't believe it, surely, do you? He said, I do. That man who went up, he was my son. He was lame before. He couldn't walk before. And for this Church of England clergyman, he turned from cynicism to conviction that God could intervene in our affairs and in our lives today. How many of you want to see more of that in your life? Can I see your hands? Now, Today, I want to lead you and open the scriptures up to you so that you can know what are the key steps for us to begin to receive our miracle. And I begin with the very first miracle, where it all began, when Jesus came in public ministry on earth. And I want to draw from the scriptures to tell you what are the principles by which we can unlock the keys, and we can unlock the door to receiving our miracles. We'll start with John chapter 2, where Jesus changed water into wine. And I want you to read it together aloud, okay? Somebody say aloud. Say it really loud, say aloud. I want you to read it so loud that you will shake this building, and everybody around this area in Westminster will know that there are happening people in an exciting church here who believe in the miracles of the Word of God. Somebody say amen. Are you ready now? Let's go now. There was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were 6 jars of stone, each containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And he said to them, "Draw some out now and take it to the master of the feast." When the master of the feast had tasted the water and was made wine, he called the bridegroom. Let's move on. Next slide. And said, "Every man starts with the good wine and then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now." This was the first of the miracles Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, he, his mother, his brothers, and his disciples. So let's ask ourselves, firstly, whose wedding feast was that? I'm absolutely convinced it was probably one of Mary's close relatives. Why? Because when they ran out of wine, she was the first to know. The servants went to her first. Now you must understand the significance of wine in Near Eastern weddings, a feast. Running out of wine in a Middle Eastern wedding feast is almost as bad as running out of food in a Chinese wedding. Okay, if you run out of food at a Chinese wedding, it is the ultimate disgrace, the ultimate shame. And you know, everyone in the village will talk about it for generations to come. And so when you run out of wine, it is an absolute disgrace. I mean, do you go and tell every guest willy-nilly, "We have run out of food," or "We have run out of wine"? Of course not. You will need to tell some member of the household, somebody whom you trust. So they went to Mary first. So that's the first clue, that it is probably one of Mary's relatives' wedding feast. The second thing about it is that she appears to have authority. Why is that? Next slide. Because they recognize that she has authority. And because, you know, they recognize that not only was she a member of the family, but they went to her first. So she must have been a matriarch of the whole family. Maybe it was her niece or her nephew that was getting married. And maybe she was a grand aunt, and everybody looked up to her, and she had authority in the extended family. So they went out to her first and said, "We have no wine," hoping that with authority, she would have the ability to solve the problem. And thirdly, she had authority over the servants, because immediately she told the servants, "Whatever Jesus says to you, whatever my son says to you, you do it." That's authority. Which are all these clues tells me that this was the wedding feast of one of Mary's close relatives in which she had authority. And the final reason why was because Jesus' brothers were there at the wedding feast. The whole family was there. I don't know about you. Do you normally in Britain take your whole family with you to a wedding feast of one of your friends? Do you? You don't, right? Well, it's the same in Malaysia, we don't. And I'm sure it's the same in Near Eastern weddings, they don't. But the whole family was there. All his brothers were there. All of Jesus' brothers were there. Tells me it was on the family's wedding feast. So what it was. And his disciples were there as well. Jesus' disciples were there. If you read the Gospel of John, you will know that Jesus at that time only had 4 disciples. Peter and Andrew, Philip and Nathanael. They were just the 4 disciples. He had not called 12 yet. These were the early days. They just happened to follow him to the wedding in Cana of Galilee. And so it was. This was a setup. Now, I'm going to give you the keys by which we enter into the miracles that Jesus wants for us. The keys that will unlock the miracles to our lives. But fundamental to the 4 keys is a key posture. There's a key posture we must have. And that key posture is when you want and you're asking God for miracles, you must learn to look with your heart. Everybody say, look with your heart. You must learn to look with your heart. Okay? The whole posture is not look with your mind, not look with your physical eyes, but you have to learn to look with your heart, with your spirit. That is the key posture to all the 4 keys I want to share with you this morning. You must learn to look with your heart. Now, Andrew Lloyd Webber once wrote, in a musical called Love Never Dies, he wrote these words. He said, look with your heart, not with your eyes. The heart understands, next slide, the heart never lies. Believe what it feels, trust what it shows. Next slide. Look with your heart always knows. Now, when I ask you to look with your heart, I'm not asking you to believe everything your heart tells you in the sense that, because the Bible tells us the heart is wicked and desperately corrupt. Who can understand it? It's a very corrupt heart. But when I ask you to look with your heart, I'm asking you to look with your spirit and your spiritual eyes in contradistinction to your mind. Because whenever we face a problem, the first thing we look is with our minds. Now don't. If you want to understand and receive your miracle, the key posture is to learn to look with your heart. Everybody say, look with your heart. Everybody say after me, I will look with my heart. Look with your heart, not with your eyes. Your heart understands. Your heart never lies. Believe what it feels, trust what it shows. Look with your heart. Your heart always knows. And here are the 4 keys by which we begin to learn to receive and walk into the miracles God has for us. And the first key is that, firstly, whatever your crisis and whatever your problems, tell Jesus about it. Look to Jesus first. Everybody say, look to Jesus first. Look to Jesus first. Look to Jesus first. And when they had run out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, we have no wine. Now, if you run out of wine at a wedding, it's crisis moment. You got virtually a short space of time to save the whole wedding feast. It's an emergency. It's a crisis. Now, in your mind, if you were Mary, the natural thing to do would be, does anybody have wine that we can borrow from in the village? Is there a wine merchant who's open? Is there anybody with an extra large cellar? Anybody who can just grab, 5, 10 people, you can borrow a few bottles of wine here and there. That's the exact thing we would do. We would immediately think of alternatives, ways of solving the problem. Who can we go to? Who can help us? Is there a shop that will be selling wine at this hour? Anything so that we can get wine. Mary didn't do any of those things. The first thing he did, when they came to him with a crisis and emergency, we have no wine. The clock is ticking. It's a matter of life or death. We have no wine. She turned immediately to Jesus. And he said to Jesus, they have no wine. It's the same with us when we meet a crisis. We come out of a doctor's office with a bad diagnosis. And the immediate thing we think of is, I need another MRI scan. I need another biopsy. I need another specialist. Is there somebody who is specialized in this area? We're looking at with our eyes. We're looking with our minds. How about when you come out of your office, you look with your heart? Jesus, this is my problem. Look with my heart. Look with your heart, not with your eyes. We're in a financial constraints, and the bank is about to withdraw our overdraft or our loans or whatever, and we're in a crisis, and is there a friendly bank manager around? Is there somebody who can just give us credit? Somebody who can give us a lifeline? It's natural for us to think like that because we look with our eyes. But if you look with the heart, you come out of the bank, and the bank manager is going to close your account. Look to Jesus. Tell him your problem. Look him first. You got a crisis within your family. Things are not happening well. Your kids are running away from the Lord. You know, they're into bad company, they're into drugs or whatever. Does anybody know any drug we have? It's natural to think like that. But you want a miracle? You begin with this. Look to Jesus first. Tell him your problem. And Mary did that. She just came and said to Jesus, we have no wine. That's first key. But how you look is not with your mind. If you look with your mind, you will not ever go to Jesus first. You will look for the bank managers or the doctors or the counselors or even the pastors first. Here's the first key. Look to Jesus first. Somebody say an amen. Here's the second key, not just look to Jesus first, okay, but, look beyond his apparent non-response. When Mary went to Jesus and told Jesus, they have no wine, Jesus' immediate response was, what has this to do with me, woman? My hour has not yet come. What kind of answer is that? What? We have no wine. It is an emergency. It's a crisis. We have no wine. What has this to do with me, woman? My hour has not yet come. What? It is a non-response. It's not a no response. It's not a yes response. It is just a non-response. Non-response, many of us take to mean God's not going to answer our prayer. Here's the second hurdle. Look with your heart. If you look with your mind, you won't overcome this hurdle. Because if you look with your mind, you say, well, God's not answering my prayer. I've given it 3 days. Nothing. Heaven is silent. God's not said anything. He's not going to respond to my... He said, he's not going to come in to help me. If you process it with your mind, you will always think like that. You've given God 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. He's not come through, so he won't come through. But if you look with your heart, you will look beyond his non-response. A non-response is things begin to happen around you which may have nothing much to do with your crisis and your need. What has this to do with me, woman? My time has not yet come. What is Jesus trying to say? It's got nothing to do with the crisis. What he was actually trying to say, and theologians will tell you this, he was saying to Mary, the day will come. The day will come when I'm going to go to the cross and I'm going to die for the sins of the world and my blood will be shed. And just before that, I will celebrate communion with my disciples, and the wine would symbolize the time of my hour. And that would be my taking away of the sins of the world. But you don't expect Mary to understand this kind of deep theological stuff, which is actually incidental to the whole crisis. It's a non-response. You come out of a doctor's office and it's a bad diagnosis, you're in crisis. And you walk out and the kids are saying to you, you walk out and see a few kids playing on the streets. And the last thing you want is kids kicking football and getting in your way. And one of them kicked the ball and it's up on a tree, and they say, sir, could you can you get a ball down for us? And you're like, come on, I've got a bad back. I've got a bad diagnosis. Last thing I want to do is help these kids, but I reach out, get the ball down for them. Is God in this? I don't know, but I've got so much in terms of thinking. And I get to my car, I've got a bad back. I reach out and nick my back and reaching out for the ball for them. Is God in this? I get into my car, I squeeze into my car to try to start it and crick my back further. It's painful and the car won't start because I've got a flat battery. It's a non-response. God, are you there? I cried out when I came to a doctor's office. You're not there. You don't care, apparently. You're not there. You're not listening. Listen, if you look with your eyes and with your mind, it will be a negative response. You think God doesn't care. But here, look at your heart. In the midst of all that's happening and swirling around you, which is actually incidental to your crisis and nothing to do with you, God's speaking to your heart. Will you be able to overcome the non-response of the situation? You're waiting for things to turn around for your kids. It hasn't come yet. Will you look with your heart beyond the non-response? You may have a few positive indicators here, but it's gone back to square one again. Will you look with your heart? Because if you look with your mind, you think God will not respond to you. Because that's what Jesus said. Because when Mary came to Jesus, that's what Jesus said. What has this to do with me, woman? My hour has not yet come. She thought he was going to be the solution, but he's giving her a tangential reply that's got absolutely nothing to do with the situation. Incidentally, a young man I knew actually, learned this phrase of Jesus by heart, so that when his mother asked him to take the trash out, he turned and said to his mother, "What has this to do with me? Woman, my hour has not yet come." And the mother said, "Gee, where did you get that word from?" Jesus said it, "Mom, Jesus." So look beyond his non-response. Can somebody say an amen to that? Everybody say, look beyond his non-response. His non-response is not a no response or negative response. It's not. It's just a non. It's not yes, it's not no. It's a non. And it is that journey we begin to overcome and look with our hearts. I tell you the story of a woman called Jean Kreider. Jean Kreider had a baby that was born with club feet. And when she brought the baby to see the doctors at the age of 5 months, the doctor says, your son will never walk again. Whatever operations we can do in corrective surgery, he will still be walking with a deformed gait. And he will never play football, he'll never play basketball, he'll never run like an ordinary kid. And Jean was so depressed, she wanted to throw herself under a bus when she walked out of a doctor's office together with a baby. But she had another child, so she decided not to commit suicide. Somebody told her about Catherine Kuhlman doing healing rallies in Pittsburgh. And so she went to listen to Catherine Kuhlman doing healing rallies. And there were people getting out of wheelchairs, and she was so excited. She wrapped her little boy up and watched. And she unwrapped it just to hope that the boy's feet would be healed. But she went out of the meeting utterly disappointed. Child was not healed. And for weeks, she was just crying out to God. She was not a believer even. But then she continued to listen to Catherine Kuhlman over the radio. And then she gave her heart to Jesus. And she continued to pray month after month after month after month. Every time praying, after praying, looking up, unwrapping the shawl and looking at the kid's feet. Still clubbed. One day her husband came back, saw her doing that. Husband was not a believer. And said to her, "Why are you doing that? I mean, if you really truly believe in God, you should believe and just receive that God is going to do the work for you." And the husband accidentally stumbled on Mark 11:24, which says, "Therefore I say to you, whatever thing you ask when you pray, believe that you receive, and you shall have them." And from that day, Jean Kreider stopped looking at her baby's feet, unwrapping the shawl. She stopped it. She just continued to cry out to God as before. Because her husband said to her, every time you unwrap and look at the feet of the baby, it's like you're trying to plant a plant, and every day you pull up by the roots to see how it's doing. It's not going to work. And so she did that. And then one day, she heard on radio Catherine Kuhlman saying on the radio, your healing is not in a process or a system or a dead word. Your healing is based on no other than the living Son of the eternal God. And his name is Jesus. And suddenly faith rose up to her. Her child was then 18 months old, sitting, lying in a corner, and she stretched out her hands to her boy. And as she had said hundreds of times before, she said, "Come to mommy." And the boy got up and walked. Completely, totally healed. And that man is in his 50s today, walking normally, running normally. The healing was complete. And this is where it begins to happen. We overcome the non-response, looking with our hearts. And here's the third key. The third key is when we do whatever he tells us. We look to do whatever he tells us. Firstly, look to Jesus, tell him your problem. Secondly, look with your heart beyond his non-response. Thirdly, look to do whatever he tells you. And when Jesus said to Mary, "My hour has not yet come," Mary was not put off. She immediately turned to the servants and said, "Whatever he says to you, do it. Do it." By that, she had faith. She put her head on the chopping block. Obviously, she had some authority in the family, but she was prepared to sacrifice her potential authority on the chopping block. Whatever he says to you, he told the servants, do it. And sometimes in the midst of you overcoming and looking beyond God's non-response, you look at God for a miracle. You come for a healing rally, nothing happens. And one day you're on a bus, you're waiting at a bus stop, And Jesus speaks to you and said, you know that boy is chewing gum? He's got this mohawk hairstyle and he's got an earring. Why don't you ask him just to pray for you? I'm not going to told you to pray for me. I mean, I wouldn't mind asking for a man of God to pray for me during a healing meeting, but this guy is just a young Christian. You don't know. So he said, would you mind just praying for me? Yeah, wow. Pray. Do you mind just praying for my back? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Jesus just healed the back. Is that enough? Is it okay, Mike? Yeah. And you're like, yeah, thanks. You just do whatever it tells you. And the bus comes and you climb onto the bus and the back pain's gone. That's how it happens. Because when you have looked with your heart, you learn to be sensitive and you just do what he tells you. I remember there was a woman who, in our congregation, she fell and fractured her tailbone, her coccyx, a sacral in the last 2 months of her pregnancy, and she was in severe pain. Eventually, they had to deliver the baby by cesarean section, but she had to nurse the baby after that, just lying on her bed and in a big armchair. She couldn't come to church for the first 2 months after delivering the baby because she was in such pain. And whenever she walked, she struggled to walk in pain. So she couldn't come to church. And then one day she heard, I visited her many, many times. Many of us visited her and prayed for her, prayed for God to heal her, prayed everything, and amen, she believed it. 4 months, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Then one day she heard we had a healing service. And Skyline, so if you've been to Skyline Church before, we are located in a 5-star hotel, okay? We are there 24/7, 365 days a year. We are one of the few and unusual churches in Malaysia that's actually embedded 24/7. We don't rent the rooms for 2 hours on Sunday. We're there 365 days a year. So you have to actually walk up this grand spiral staircase in this beautiful 5-star hotel to get up to the 3rd floor where we are. Okay, you have to just walk. And she struggled. She asked her husband to bring her to the meeting because she heard that there was a healing meeting. And the Spirit of God said to her, go to that meeting. She said, God, I can hardly walk. But nevertheless, she told her husband. Husband said, you're mad. But she said, just drop me at the foyer. I will walk. I will get there. Her husband said, okay, I'll look after the kid, but you must be mad. Are you sure it'll be okay? She said, just drop me. And she went, and this is how she climbed up the steps. One hand over the other on the banister, and she just pulled herself up. And I was speaking at that evening healing meeting. I saw her walk through the door, on the glass door, and I thought, what on earth is she doing here? She was struggling as she was walking with a cane and could hardly walk. And then during the time of the ministry, she came forward. And one of my young pastors prayed for her. I didn't even lay hands on her. One of my young pastors prayed for her. She fell under the power. I went to the young pastor immediately and said, get her off the floor because she's got a bad back. She might even sue us for this pain. And you know what? She sat up, dusted herself off the floor, and said, Pastor, it's gone. My back pain is gone. And she started walking up and down. And then she started running down the hall of the auditorium. And there was just a faith level that rose up that day. I said to her, why? I mean, you could hardly walk. Why did you come? I mean, what made you come? He said, I just heard a voice saying, just go. Whatever he says to you, just do it. And it's unusual. And she was totally healed. So that's the third thing. Look to do whatever he tells you. And here's the fourth thing that you do. Can I have a slide? Fourth thing that you do. Look to step out and receive your miracle. Now, we don't know where and when the miracle took place. And we don't know how it took place. But we do know that, firstly, they had to overcome, Mary had to overcome this hurdle. Look to do whatever he tells you. Mary told the servants, look to do whatever he tells you. Whatever he tells you, do it. And there were 6 water pots there, each containing about 30 gallons, we are told. And obviously, those are cleansing pots. Pots that have been used for people to cleanse themselves before they go into the feast. So they're probably very low in level now. And Mary says, and Jesus says, fill the water pots up with water. And in those days, there's no running water. You have to go down to the well, take, pitchers of water, come up, hard work, and then dump it in and, keep pouring water in. Eventually, it was all filled to the brim. 6 water pots, 30 gallons each, 180 gallons altogether, filled to the brim. Now, and then Jesus said to them, now take some water, this is water, and serve it to the master of the feast. So they put it into smaller pitcher pots, and that's where they walked in. Now somewhere, if you read the Greek suggests that somewhere from the point at which they took the water pot in to the point they poured it out to the master of the feast, the water became wine. We don't know how, we don't know exactly when, we don't know, but it was in that transition period. The water became wine. You stepped out and you receive your miracle. And it's the same when you do whatever he tells you. You don't even expect it. Because the guy who prayed for you was just chewing gum and he's got rings, earrings, and he's got tattoos, but you just obeyed. And then he wasn't even healed after he prayed. But then as you got into the bus, somewhere on that journey, when you got off the bus, pain's gone. The miracle took place. It's the same for our families. It's the same for our marriages. It's the same for our finances. Same for our health. Same for our relationships. Same for the things God wants to take us through. And so somewhere in that, the miracle took place. When you do the first three, then somewhere in following the Lord, you step out and you receive your miracle. But let me just say as three things about miracles. People say to me, if miracles are so great, why don't we hear about it? Why don't you read it in the Daily Telegraph or the Times, or comes out on Facebook or social media? How come all these people, all these Christians are talking about miracles, and we don't hear about if God is so good? Why is it? I would tell you there are three things about the miracles in the New Testament, and these three things are the reason why people will not shout about it from the rooftops, and you don't hear this spectacular on televisions, or you don't hear about this spectacular in the newspapers or social media. Firstly, miracles are spectacular, but they are silent. They are absolutely silent. What do I mean by the miracles being spectacular? Well, this is what it means. Jesus converted water into wine. He converted H2O into C2H5OH. Next slide, okay? That's what he did. Just a bit of chemistry for you, okay? How many of you remember the chemical formula for alcohol is C2H5OH? Say an amen. Okay, only a very soft amen, but I just take it by faith. It is C2H5OH, okay? Now you look at the molecular formula for water. It's H2O. There is no carbon atoms there. There is no C there. But to get alcohol, you need to create C, carbon, out of hydrogen. That's spectacular. Do you know where carbon is created out of hydrogen? Do you know where it's created? It is created in the center of the sun, where there's thermonuclear fusion and temperatures of 20 to 40,000 degrees centigrade. Hydrogen fuses to form helium, and helium fuses to form carbon. It's the only way you can create carbon. You can't create it just in normal situations on Earth. Somewhere as they took the water pots and to serve it to the master of the feast, hydrogen became carbon. It's spectacular, but it's silent. That's the way God does it. I don't know why. He does it like that. But it is. If you look at Jesus stilling the storms, he was in the boat with his disciples. It's spectacular. But who saw it? Only his 12 disciples. That's all. Hey, if I were Jesus, and I was God, I would organize for Jesus to come in the 21st century, where there's satellite television and internet and social media and everything else. And I would get Jesus to stand up, during a big feast day, and everybody, thousands of people, maybe at a royal wedding, when everybody's watching, and Jesus then whips up a storm. And then he stands up, and all the television cameras are on him. And the storm is going to destroy the royal wedding. And billions of people are watching. And he says, peace, be still. Boom. You know what? Immediately, he will get 5 billion likes on social media. Excuse me, God, why didn't you do it during this time? Why didn't you do it during the 21st century? You missed it big time, 1st century AD. He stilled the storm. 12 people saw it. At least he could have done it on the feast of the Passover. On the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem, with thousands of people coming for the feast, we whip up a storm and then say, hey guys, see, I'm God. Peace be still. Boom. And they will all follow him. He didn't even do that. He just demonstrated it for these 12 people. It's spectacular, but it's silent. That's the nature of miracles. And that's why they don't come out in our newspapers. That's why they don't come on social media. Because in telling the miracle, it just falls flat somehow. And people hear it, they think, oh, that's good for you. You're very gullible. They'll patronize you. But deep down inside, they don't believe it. That's why you don't see it in the social media. It doesn't make the newspaper headlines. Because miracles are firstly very spectacular, but they're silent. And here's the second reason why the nature of miracles that we hear in the New Testament. They are public. They may be done in a public domain, but they are very personal. To that lady who was healed of that broken backbone in the church, people may be shouting and cheering, but it's public, but it's very, very personal to her. For her, it changed her faith. It's just like Bartimaeus, when Jesus was walking by outside Jericho, he said, Jesus, son of David, have mercy upon me. And people said, shut up, old man, shut up. And he wouldn't be shut up. And Jesus came to him and said, what can I do for you? And he said, my eyes, Rabbi, my eyes. And Jesus said, your faith has made you whole. And everybody saw Bartimaeus. Everybody knew Bartimaeus in Jericho. He'd been there for years, yonks. He was older than all the antique furniture in Jericho. Everybody knew about him. And everyone else saw that he could see. And everybody cheered. Bravo! Wow, that was great. Wonderful. And as far as they're concerned, Jesus has done another spectacular miracle. And their attitude was, next, let's go to inside Jericho and see what other miracles Jesus is going to do. That was great. But Jesus is going to do something greater. That was all their attitude was. Bravo! Well done. Hey, great. But for Bartimaeus, it's everything. It's totally personal. For him, all his years spent begging, now over. The devastation in his life, the denigration, everything, his life changed. For him, it's public for everybody. People will say, well done, great, we cheer with you. But for him, it's totally personal. It's the same with the woman who had the issue of blood. She was healed in a public domain. She had spent all her monies for 12 years on physicians and never been healed. And then she tugged at the hem of Jesus' garment. A last hope. She just grasped at whatever straw she had just grabbed. And she even got her theology wrong. Because Jesus could have turned and said to her, excuse me, woman, you grab the hem of my garment and you think you'll be healed. Hey, let me tell you this. Theologically speaking, my garment has no power. It's me that has the power. Don't you know that? You should grab my leg, and then you will be healed. Because you got your theology wrong, woman, you're not healed. Sorry. She got her theology wrong. She grabbed the hem of his garment. And Jesus said to her, you believe by grabbing the hem of my garment, you will be healed. Then you are healed. In my name, you are healed. Grace came into her life. She was healed. It's public. And everybody around was wondering, what's it all about? 12 years, hemorrhaging, a very private thing. Nobody knew. And at that point in time, we are told, Jairus was trying to get Jesus to go to his house to heal her daughter who was dying by the minute. In fact, because of this woman, the daughter died. And Jesus spending all the time in the world with this woman. And for Jairus, he will probably be thinking, what is this, excuse the language, bloody woman doing here? Holding up my Jesus, going to my house. With her issue of the hemorrhage. But she was healed. It's public, you see, but it's very personal. And here's the final thing about miracles when they happen. They are abundant and abiding. Okay? Now, I want to say this, just one word about public personal. Just to prove to you that it was very public, the Cana in Galilee, but it was very personal. We are told that after this spectacular miracle, only 4 people believed in him. Of course, Mary believed in him, but only 4 new converts, 4 people, his disciples, believed in him. Not the master of the feast, not the wedding guests at the feast, not Mary's relatives, not the servants. Nobody else believed in him. Only 4 persons believed in him in this spectacular miracle. Proof of that, next slide. Proof of that is when Jesus came back to Cana of Galilee. When Jesus came, only 1 person turned up to see him. In John chapter 4, let's read verse 46 to 47. So let's read it aloud, go. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. He went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son. Next slide. And this was Jesus' second sign. This was the second time Jesus came to Cana. Listen, if Jesus did a spectacular and saved the wedding feast, you would expect thousands of people. The word would have gone around the whole village of Cana, so that when Jesus came back to Cana the second time, there would be thousands of people waiting for him. Not at all. Only 1 man came. He was a nobleman from Capernaum, another village. And he had heard of Jesus. He said, Jesus, can you come down to Capernaum and heal my son? And the Bible tells us this was Jesus' second sign. It's the second time he came to Capernaum, to Cana. That tells me it was a spectacular miracle in Cana. But he was very silent. It was very public, but it was personal just to 4 disciples. Nobody else knew. That's why, friends, you don't hear of miracles in the 21st century that everybody publicize. And that's one of the things that tell us, oh, God, it can't be doing. It's all imaginary fantasy, gullible Christians sharing about miracles. That's why. Because if Jesus is so great and did all these miracles and all these things, we would have had it in the news and the social media and the spectacular and television. Don't believe it. It never happened in the first century. It won't happen today. Because the nature of the miracles is the spectacular, but they're silent. They're very public, but they're very personal. And here's the third thing about the miracles. They are abundant and they are abiding. They're abundant and they're abiding. Okay? Next slide. They're abundant and they're abiding. Now, when I say abundant, as I close, let me just say this to you. Jesus converted 6 pots of water containing 30 gallons each into wine. That's abundant. That translates to about 1,680 liters of wine. That's a huge amount of wine. Huge amount of wine. And that's more than enough wine for a royal wedding. More than enough. When Queen Elizabeth married Prince Philip, you know how many guests were at the royal wedding? 2,000 guests were at the royal wedding. 1,680 liters of wine. You know how many guests can make merry with that amount of wine? At least 2,000. At least 2,000 guests can make merry, average, with that amount of wine. In other words, the amount of wine Jesus made was not just enough for a village wedding. It's enough for a royal wedding. More than ever could be contained in the courtyards of Mary's relative. More than ever. So when Jesus does things, it's not like just enough. Just okay. It's abundant. More than enough. That more than enough left over probably to drink for the rest of the year. And it's abiding. It lasts. As I close, let me just tell you the story personally of our own daughter. Nancy and I, we have 3 children. Our youngest daughter, Sarah, at the age of 4, was found accidentally strangulated on a clothesline. Some of you may have heard the story before. She was in the violin teacher's house, playing with another girl of 3 years old. She climbed onto a stool. There was a piece of loose string coming from a clothesline. She stuck her head into it, and she was accidentally strangled. And nobody saw that except a 3-year-old girl who had no vocabulary to tell anybody. And she was hung. We don't know how long. But by the time she was found, she was dead. No pulse, no respiration, nothing. She was absolutely dead. And eventually, I was told to go, and I got there just in time. I don't know, I was stuck in a traffic jam as I was rushing there. And everything in my mind told me, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. Nothing can help now. She's going to suffer permanent brain damage, or if she ever comes back to life, or she's dead. And here I'm trapped in a traffic jam. Look with your heart, not with your eyes. The heart understands. The heart never lies. Look to Jesus first. Tell him your problem. Look to this apparent non-response. What was the non-response? I was stuck in a traffic jam. Couldn't get there. Look beyond the non-response. Look to do whatever he tells you. And the Spirit of God said to me, I want you to curse the spirit of death when you get to your child. Just curse it. Don't bother about your stethoscope and your CPR. Just curse the spirit of death. It's crazy. Because I'm trained to do CPR. I'm a doctor. Let's put aside my medical bag when I got, just curse the spirit of death. It's crazy. And then wait for God and step into your miracle. Sarah started breathing again. Then she came back to life, but she had all the signs of permanent brain damage. Permanent brain damage. Reported in the hospital, she was in a coma, she was in intensive care. But we knew that even if she come back to life, she had all the signs of permanent brain damage. And yeah, so I could continue to look with my heart. Because my mind tells me, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. I know too much medicine. This is not going to work. Look with your heart, not with your eyes. The heart understands. The heart never lies. And so it was, just to cut a long story short. In the midst of all that, overnight, we were praying. You know, this is a praying church. There's nothing more important in the church to be totally galvanized and undergirded with prayer. And the church was only about a year old. We just had about 100 people in the church, that's all. I just started pastoring. And the church went back to their homes and prayed. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, Sarah woke up completely healed. Completely healed. Totally healed. And you know, she was completely healed. And she woke up on her 4th birthday. That was her 4th birthday. And when dawn broke, people started coming from all over the city, our church, and they saw this miracle. Of course, the faith level rose in the church, and the church started growing incredibly during that time. But it never made the newspaper headlines in our city. It never made the internet headlines in our city. Even some of my doctor colleagues who saw it happen, they were absolutely cynical about it. It's public, but for Pastor Nancy and myself, personal. For the church, personal. They saw it happen. It was spectacular, but it happened silently at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was abundant. God not just restored her, but completely, all her faculties are restored. Completely restored. People say today, how's Sarah? I said 110%. Truly? With all the signs of brain damage, isn't there any scars emotionally and psychologically? No, she doesn't remember anything. There must be some scars neurologically. They must have hampered her in all her studies and everything else. No. Sarah today, she's at the center. These are all my kids, okay? Sarah's the youngest. Sarah today is 20 years old. She's in medical school today. God has not just done something abundant, but it is abiding. And that's how the nature of miracles are in the New Testament. How many of God want God to do a miracle in your life? How many of you want to experience God's miracle for your life right now? Lift it up, wave it at me. Wave it at me. How many of you want God to use you so that you will see miracles happen to your families as well? Can I see your hands? And the people you love right now. You know, next slide. I've done the best I can. And I've put it together in, next slide, a book that I've just written. Some of these stories I'm telling you, they're in a book that I've written called Slingshots. Over the 18 years I've pastored the church, every Sunday I write a blog for the church. They're about my devotionals, things God has shown me in the Word, about our family struggles and our family challenges, about the challenges facing the church, about truths and insights that God has helped us to overcome, challenges in our lives, about observations and insights, what's happening in the world today, whether it's 9/11 or whatever, what God is saying. I've put it together because over the years, 18 years, every Sunday, there are probably a couple of thousands of these blogs. I put them together, about 200 of the best. I put them together in a book called Slingshots, and each blog is just one page. You can just read it, and it's just one page. hopefully it will bring insight, it will bring inspiration, it will bring wisdom, comfort, and faith to your lives. I call it slingshots because hopefully, as you read them, the Goliaths of your own life will fall. They will slay the Goliaths of your life. You can pick them up. You'll find that helpful outside after the service this morning. And they're very easy to read because you can read just one page and that's it. You can go to another posting on another page. I tell people it makes excellent gifts, but it also makes excellent toilet reading, But I only ask that you never use it for toilet paper. That's all, okay? How many of you want to see God do a great miracle in your life? Can I see your hands right now? All heads bowed, all eyes closed. I want to speak to people right now, all across this auditorium right now. Today is a very special day. The greatest miracle that can happen in your life is when you open the door of your heart and allow Jesus to come into your life. Jesus, 2,000 years ago, died for your sin. He hung on the cross for your sins and mine. On the cross, He demonstrated His love for you. Today, He knocks at the door of your heart and He says to you, my son, my daughter, will you open the door of your heart to me today? Because if you open the door of your heart, Jesus will come into your heart today. He will come in. He will give you a new life. He will give you a new beginning. He will fill you with His love. He will fill you with His joy this morning. And all you have to do is to open the door of your heart. And you say, Pastor Philip, how do I know how to open the door of my heart? Today I'm going to lead you in a very simple prayer that you can open the door of your heart. Because if you do, He will come in. Friends, don't leave this place without opening the door of your heart to Jesus today. And if you've done it many years ago, but you've gone away from the Lord, today is your day to recommit your life to Him. Open the door of your heart again to Him today. So to my right and left, front and back. Today, if you say, Pastor Philip, I want to open the door of my heart to Jesus. I want that first miracle. The greatest miracle is to open my heart and for Jesus to come in. That's the greatest miracle. Today, I want to open the door of my heart to Jesus. Then at the count of 3, I want you to lift up your hand and look at me right now. I'm going to acknowledge you. 1, 2, 3. Just lift it up. Lift up your hand and look at me right now. Look at me. I'm going to acknowledge you, okay, as you do that. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Don't put down your hand until I've acknowledged you. Please do that. Thank you, ma'am in the red. Thank you, sir, in the back with the 2 hands up, and next to you, ma'am, as well. And ma'am in green, sir, right here in the front with the red tie. Thank you. God bless you. If I don't see you, wave your hand at me. Thank you, ma'am, right now. And the man in the cap as well. God bless you, sir. I see that man in green. Thank you. Both hands up. Thank you. I see that as well. Right now, at the back. Wave at me if I don't see you. I see those hands there. God bless you. God bless you. Anyone at the back? I see those 2 hands up there, sir, on the gallery there. Thank you. God bless you. Right at the back there. Yes, at the back. Right there, the last seat. Yes, thank you. I see the lady in black. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Lift up your hand. Lift up those hands. I see those hands. 2 hands up there. God bless you. Yes, I see those hands. You're opening your heart to recommit your life to Jesus, to give your heart to Jesus. That's right. Just wave at me right now. All those in the gallery up there. I see all those hands up there. I see those. You're going to put your hands down the gallery up there right now. God bless you. I see those hands up there at the back there. Right there. Okay, I see those. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. On my left here. Right now, thank you, Dad. And here, ma'am, right down there. And I see that. Ma'am, you're in a maroon cardigan. Thank you so much. Yeah, I see the hand. Anyone else? See the hand? See the hand? See the hand there? Thank you. Anyone in the gallery up there? I see the hand, guys, up there. God bless you. God bless you. Now, all those you put up your hands, I want you to do one thing. Lift up your hand one more time and wave it at me right now. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do something. I want you to stand up on your feet right now. Can you do that? Let's give them a big hand. You stand up on your feet right now. Just give them a really big hand. And I want you to ask you to, if you can, just to come forward because I want to pray for each and every one of you today to recommit your life to Jesus. Just come forward. Let's give them a big hand. Come on, let's give them a big hand. I'm going to ask you to just come forward. Jesus died for you on the cross. He loved you. He wants to do something spectacular, and the greatest miracle in your life is the miracle